So let's look at a polynomial function here and let's determine where the zeros are at based on the things that we know so far. And looking at it, I can't factor it because if I could factor it right now, that would help me determine really quickly. So I need to start looking for zeros, but where do you look? Fortunately, we remember that we can look at the ratio of potential rational zeros of the constant term, the factors of the constant, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6, all over plus or minus 1. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So at least I was able to narrow down out of all the possibilities down to 8 opportunities. And so now it's just a little bit of trial and error. Which one of those is a potential zero? And I can do it by using some synthetic or long division and just seeing if one of these is a factor of the particular problem. So let's start with 1 right there, and let's see if 1 is a factor of this through synthetic division or long division, depending on whatever one you would like to do. Drop down to 1. 1 times 1 is a 1. 2 plus 1. 2 plus 1 is a 3. 1 times 3, 3. Negative 2. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Left with a negative 8. My remainder here is not 0. So therefore, 1 is not a solution, and x minus 1 is not a factor of this problem. All right, well, we have 7 more to try. Let's try another one. Let's try 2. Drop down to 1. 1 times the 2. 2, add them. 2 times 4 is 8. Gives me a 3. 2 times a 3 is a positive 6. And I'm left with a 0. I have a 0 there, so that tells me that 2 is a 0 or a root of this equation. And it also tells me that x minus 2 is a factor of that. Awfully doggone cool. And if we remember, we can also decipher what this is as well. The other factor is 1x squared plus 4x plus a 3. And let me put this x minus 2 down here as well. That's one of the things that we can determine by using some of the tools that we've used so far. So this does factor. I determined that it factored by looking at some of the possible roots that we had. By trial and error, I found one of the possible roots, which was 2, which tells me that I have a factor of x minus 2, with this being the remainder part of the equation. Now I just want to see if this factors. X minus 2 is what I have. Let's see if this factors cleanly. X here, x plus a 3, x plus a 1. And so it does factor, and I have 3 zeros to this equation. I have zeros, or my solution set is 2, negative 3, and negative 1. Those are my 3 zeros. And I was able to do some very complicated stuff by being pretty good at some smaller computations.